Hello. Welcome to Season 8 of the Horrific Podcast. We're two friends who live in different places but share a love for scary movies. In each episode, we both watch the same movie on our own and then record a conversation together about what we liked, what we hated, if we were scared, and maybe even some larger truths about why people watch horror movies in the first place. This season, our theme is Make the Wives Pick. Since our wives have to watch these movies with us every week, and often complain about it, we made them pick the movies this season. If you want to see the list of upcoming films and follow along, check out our website at thehorrific.com. Thanks for listening. So, we're back with another bonus episode talking about episodes 5 and 6 of The Haunting of Bly Manor. We put season 8 on pause for a little bit to review this show, much like we did with The Haunting of Hill House back when it was relatively new. We were both really excited about this series coming out and wanted an excuse to watch it and talk about it. So season 8's just on pause for a little bit, and we'll be back with our normal, movie review episodes here shortly.
Yeah. The good thing is that we have a bunch of episodes over the years that you could just go back and listen to if you don't want to listen to anything about Bly Manor.
That's very true. We also have some short horror fiction on our website, thehorrific.com, if you want something to read.
Yep.
We got anything else to sell?
I got a car out in my driveway. No.
Just needs a couple tires and alternator. It'll be good.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the first one we watched was episode 5, The Altar of the Dead. And I think this was by far my favorite episode so far.
Really?
Yeah. You talked before about feeling like the series had been kind of vanilla as far as like the scene transitions and stuff. And like a lot of the things that we really liked from a, I guess, movie making or TV show making experience in The Haunting of Hill House didn't really seem to be present in this one. And to me, this one almost felt like it was like a different director. Like the storytelling was totally different. They did a lot of the transitional shots of like a person in the same place at different times. Like basically everything that we like as far as how you put together a movie, it felt like this episode did. Obviously on a smaller scale because it's an episode, not a full movie, but I was very pleased with it. And this one grabbed my attention a lot more in the way that the story was told than previous ones.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. It definitely, for sure had a different writer on it. I guess I said for sure. I don't know that for sure. But it seemed like a different writer as well. And it seemed like they were trying to come back on like the directing style throughout that whole series or episode. Yeah.
This one also had a really good horror scene, and I felt like was just way less predictable and dramatic than the first few episodes had been. And when I say dramatic, I don't mean like over the top acting so much. It's just like the story so far I feel like has been very driven in like I'm watching an independent drama film type manner. Whereas this one actually felt like a legitimate study in psychological horror, which is what I love from this series. And so for me, this was just the one that got me, because, at the end of episode 4, I was like, what is this even going to be? I don't know that I'm super excited about the rest of this series, but if we had not been doing episode 6 as part of this episode, I would have watched it anyway. I was so into it by the end of this episode 5.
I think I was got a little bit more so confused on what was going on, because it was definitely a change up filming directing style,
Yeah.
Where you're like, wait, what is what is she saying here? Why are they saying the same things? It started to make more sense, I guess, towards the end of the episode, but it did reveal a lot of information. The whole series, or this episode, I think, is what gave out most of the information that we've kind of thought or guessed on, leading up to it, what happened to Mrs. Gross, what happened to Peter,
But yeah, this episode is all about Mrs. Gross, and it jumps around in time a lot, but more I feel like we've seen that in previous episodes, but this one is very focused on a single character. And so it establishes this idea of repeating your own past kind of primarily through two scenes. One is her discussion with Owen at the campfire. Also her discussion with Owen at his interview when he very first came to Bly Manor. Yeah. But in between those replays, it's Mrs. Gross at different times in recent history. So you get more background on the other characters and see kind of like a patchwork of her history during her time at Bly and the people around her. And it's really interesting how that made me think differently about previous episodes. Because you have, like, in the last episode, she was just sort of like this character that was there. But you see her experiencing those same scenes, like, as a replay. Mm-hmm. So you're wondering, like, and I had noticed, too, that there was, like, a flashback before where some dialogue was different than the first time we saw it. And I thought, that's really weird. But then as these scenes repeat, she, like, has the ability to, like, change the way that she interacts with it. And then one of those was what we had heard previously. So it was a really like disorienting thing because it's like this person has lived this same experience a number of times, but which one have we seen and are they all doing that now? So what does that mean for like all of the characters and their interactions so far? It just really, to me, like completely opened up the possibilities of this world that we're watching and made me a lot less sure about a lot of things, which I kind of liked because it to me, kind of some like the romance subplots were starting to feel a little predictable before. And so this was just like a really nice change of pace.
Yeah, I think it was almost to keep the viewers like on their toes, trying to figure out what's going on. Like a real kind of mystery episode. Yeah. And trying to figure out, or it was almost like a little confusing to the effect of like, this is how she died, or like, is this how she died, or is this what really happened? But you don't know if she's dreaming or
what
exactly. The case is. So
you have very little context for it.
Yeah, like it felt like you had to pay attention pretty well to this episode, which made sense.
Yeah, and this one, it covered, I mentioned it being like the patchwork of her history. It gives you a lot of insight into other characters too. Mm-hmm. And so I have just kind of like some bullet points of like things that stood out in there because a lot of it was sort of her just understanding what was going on and you as the viewer understanding what was going on and a lot of like repeating of scenes. Yeah. But some of the things we could take out of that is like, for one, Rebecca and Peter made up. So previously they had parted after like the big fight after the cake batter tasting, and she seemed very like devastated. And so the question was like, is she going to kill herself just over this guy that she hung out with for a few days? But no, he comes back. He's reintroduced. Their relationship is a thing that continued, whereas that wasn't clear before. And then also Gross's husband ran away with another woman. Yeah. He didn't die. But she presumably moved into the manor after that. And Charlotte, the mom, was very like kind to her through that situation and very supportive. And so that kind of explains more like why she was so protective of Charlotte's stuff. Mm-hmm. Like when she's talking to Peter later, because you didn't really have anything at all about their relationship before that.
Right.
So.
Yeah, you definitely learned. I feel like you learn a lot about Charlotte as much as you do.
Yes. Yeah.
Gross.
Yeah, she's cast as a very like sympathetic character in this one, I think.
Yeah.
But, yeah. There's also the scene where she sees the muddy footprints and then goes out the front door and sees Rebecca standing by the lake. I thought that was interesting because one of my previous predictions was that Rebecca is the Lady of the Lake somehow, even though that may or may not work out. But and then I think kind of the big reveal was when Gross is in the room with Peter and Rebecca talking about running away together. And then Quint leaves and Rebecca starts talking to Gross and says, "You're not usually in this one." And so it's obvious she's reliving memories too.
Yeah.
And that you can like cross over between them. And so there's this idea, and I think somebody used the phrase having other people's dreams, which was very intriguing to me because now it's beyond just your own memories that you're reliving. You may be able to somehow relive other people's memories too, which makes it even less predictable and explainable.
Mm-hmm. Mind blowing.
Yeah.
Yet again, you just don't know what to believe when you're watching it.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I guess my favorite scene in this one was when Peter's interaction with the Lady of the Lake.
Oh, yeah.
That came out of nowhere for me, and that really grabbed me. And because you had spent a lot of time not liking him, and then to kind of see him get what he had coming was good. So when she just comes out and straight up grabs him by the face and drags him down the hallway, I was almost like cheering for the monster, which is some of my favorite like type of horror is when the person that has it coming gets it. And so that was kind of neat. But then he comes back, and then you see her come back still dragging his body. So like his own, almost the way he like didn't realize he was dead at first. And then he saw that and then freaked out. And then you as the viewer were really confused. And then you're like, oh, wow, he is a ghost. Bryce was right. Obviously, Peter's been dead. And, but then you do see him finally like temporarily possess Miles.
Yeah. Yeah, that's where you see it for the first time. I was thinking the same thing when he died. I was like, honestly, like right before he died, like literally right before, I was sitting there thinking like, this guy, like, is he going to be like the ultimate bad guy of the story, you know, where, you know, he ends up going crazy and killing people or whatever. And then it was like literally right after I thought that, wrote it down, he was walking past her and she put her hand on his throat, and the rest is history, you know?
Yeah.
But he went through, I think the saddest thing about that was that Miles and Flora were like watching it go down.
Yeah.
In the
for
hall,
sure.
you know?
Yeah.
And, it was just, super, super kind of sad because you're like, oh man, I don't think they understand what's going on, but yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And there was something going on with Flora, like seeming scared of the Lady of the Lake, but not of the other ghosts. Yeah. So like she's dropped a couple of lines about staying away from the Lady of the Lake or something, but also about, you know, talking to the others or interacting with the others. And she doesn't seem afraid of them at all. And so there's something fundamentally different about what the Lady of the Lake is and what the other ghosts in the house are. And I find that very interesting.
Yeah. Well, and that strictly stems from, I would think, from the experience of the Lady in the Lake and Peter, you know, grabbing him by the throat and pulling him in of why you should stay away, you know. And in the earlier episodes where it seemed like they were being super weird, like, promise me not to go out after night or after dark, you know, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Wasn't just to be weird, it was sounded like to protect her, you know, to protect Danny.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was all good info, like good way of moving the story forward and everything.
Well, it also, like, you know, we talked about when Miles is causing a ruckus at school and saying, just trying to find the right key.
Yeah.
Like, you can kind of realize, like, oh, was that, you know, Peter doing it?
Yeah, definitely. So,
well, I guess it could have been Peter because he can't leave the manor. That must have just been an influence.
We don't know that yet.
Because I don't think he can leave the manor.
But yeah, yeah, that's interesting. So, yeah, and then there was also the really sad scene where Gross says yes to Owen. So one of the times she's reliving her memory around the campfire and he's talking about going away to France together. There's like the alternate take of that where she says, yes, I will go with you. And she stands up to try and follow him. But then it's like a replay and he can't hear her and she can't catch up to him as he's leaving. And that was just like absolutely heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And the way that was weaved into like sort of the psychological horror element of the episode to where like you're reliving this memory, but now you realize you can't change it even if you want to. And it's like you're on a repeat that you don't have control of. And just the way that it had all been set up with the relationship between those two characters, I thought was a very just like gut wrenching twist. And,
Yeah,
and
I mean,
like that.
this whole episode was a gut wrenching twist. I mean, we were just talking
Well,
about
yeah.
how we love, their relationship and all that, and then they're doing the interview where Owen's being interviewed by Miss Gross.
Yeah.
And like he starts to kind of snap, and you're like, oh no.
Yeah.
No, please don't don't turn it into this. And then you realize, why. But like the last thing I wanted was for like Owen to be a bad guy.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So and I like that they talked about, I guess him. I forget the phrasing, but anyway, he says like, I'm just you. Like you're looking at a reflection of yourself. You're reassuring yourself or whatever. Yeah. So the distinction between this is the actual character versus this is like sort of my mental recreation of the character, I liked. But yeah. Overall, in general, I thought this was a very like positive episode for the series. I enjoyed it a lot more than most of the others that we've watched recently. So,
well, it also one thing that's pretty important, which you kind of get in this episode at the end of the episode, is it seems like that Miss Gross was killed the day that Danny showed up.
So yeah, so that was one of my predictions actually, is that we'll get confirmation on that, because it was kind of unclear at the time if those were happening at the same time or if she was just going from one memory to the other. But I do think that Quint killed Gross by pushing her in the well.
Yeah, for sure. But what she's in, so the reason why I think it is because what she's wearing, when she first meets Danny same thing. So that's was what I guess I was kind of leaning into. But you do see that something funny happened, with it. Unfortunately. Yeah. That little son of a bitch, Miles.
Yeah.
Killed my only love.
Yep. We're just going to have to go to the manor.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so my other predictions were, one, that the Lady of the Lake will get Rebecca too. I think that's already happened in the past. Like, I think that's what happened, how she died initially.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other prediction was that the Lady of the Lake has been taking people from the house for a long time, and those are the other ghosts you see in the background sometimes. Gotcha. Like they're stuck there. But so before I'd said that I think Rebecca was the Lady of the Lake. Yeah. Now I don't think that. I think that the Lady of the Lake is something that's a longer term deal, and like just the way she grabbed Peter, that there's been like other people in the house that she's gotten. Yeah. So the kids know about that, and that's why they've been trying to keep Danny away.
Yeah. Which is like just crazy to think about.
Yeah. They're just like living with it.
Yeah.
It's like they grew up with it, and so it's just normal to them. It's weird.
Poor kids, man.
Yeah. Well, someone think of the children.
Yeah.
But yeah. So yeah, overall, a good episode. I liked it. Like I said, I was very, very pulled in with this one. I was paying much closer attention, and it definitely did more of that, make you feel like you're watching, like you're captured in an experience, which is what we want from a horror movie.
So, tying into your prediction actually kind of makes sense, because with like Flora, it's almost like she's talked to the other ghosts, because she specifically says the others, they say stay away from her. Talking about the lady in the lake. So, it's almost like, it has, like, she's aware of the other ghosts, but they're not nearly as bad. There's...
Yeah. So anyway, the only other thing I had in my notes, this one, we did have a very small cameo from the narrator to set it up, but it was nothing beneficial towards revealing the narrator's identity. So. Yeah. But yeah, so then we are right into episode 6, and I was really glad we did these two episodes together, because I thought they fit together very well.
Yeah.
Because in this one, the revolving, they kept that whole like reliving memories, jumping through time thing, but this one it's mostly from Flora's perspective, and so you find out that kind of some big like story spoilers that Henry, her uncle, presumably was actually her dad, that he and Charlotte had been hooking up when Dominic was out of town, and then Dominic figures that out, and he and Charlotte take a trip to India to like rekindle their romance, and they get in some kind of accident while they're there. But Dominic had previously told Henry that he was banished from the manor and the family and was to never, come near them again. So Henry's been in like a weird place because of that. And there's this like weird ghost of himself for like his dark side or something that he's interacting with.
Yeah.
That I couldn't really figure out the motivations of. Like it was just a really strange situation.
Well, it was kind of reminded me of Dani and her ex-fiance.
To some extent, but the fiance was somebody else. You know what I mean? Like this was.
Yeah, but so I think it was like that's the baggage. That's their mental war that they're going through. Is that. But yeah. I mean, it did seem like this one. This guy was a lot meaner and stuff, but it was almost like it was like a mental battle, like that same kind of thing that Dani was dealing with of, the guilt and all that, like kind of a symbolism of what they're going through. And that could have been his alcoholism, or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But yeah, overall, this episode wasn't really scary. And to be honest, I was kind of bored until the ending sequence. Like it was good directing and scene transitions and storytelling, but not really anything scary or suspenseful. It was just kind of straightforward. We did hear from the narrator twice, once in the beginning where she talks about Mr. Wingrave preferred the office to his flat, locked himself away there. So you find out that he's like kind of sequestered himself in his office basically all the time. But then you find out while he's there, he's got this alter ego thing that also seems to be able to drink from his cup that hangs out with him. So yeah, that's just kind of weird. And then in the middle of the episode, the narrator was talking about Dani having slept as well as she ever had when she wakes up next to Jamie. So again, the narrator seems so random to me. And I'm curious if at the end we can go back and look at our notes and say, oh, this is why the narrator was talking there. Or if it really is just we had to find somewhere in each episode to keep alive this premise that this whole thing is a story being told in the future. But yeah.
Yeah, I think it also, like, I was kind of in the same boat where this episode was kind of boring, honestly. I mean, I think you do find out a lot of information, a lot of important information. But it was almost like a drama that was going on. It was like Henry's brother finds out and, cuts him off. And Charlotte, she bails, It did, though, have a couple of the transitions that I talked about last episode that I kind of missed. One specifically was Henry walking into the other room at his office and it being like, that was like his transition was opening up to back in time.
Yeah.
When things were going on.
Yeah. One thing I thought was interesting, it wasn't scary so much as it might be like set up for future horror stuff, but this one also introduced the little boy in the nightgown that has like the blurry face, kind of like in the portraits in the opening credits. And Flora sees him in her room and runs to tell her mom, and then sees like Henry is there in the mom's bedroom. And they play it off like it's no big deal, but they are clearly more worried about keeping her distracted from the fact that they're sleeping together and not taking the story seriously at all. And so there was a line, though, that Henry dropped. He said something about, like, when I was a kid, it was an old soldier, and I gave him a name and a story or something. And so I was really curious to know if he was talking about just having an imaginary friend as a kid, or if he also experienced a ghost there at Bly, but had just then not told anybody or something. So,
man, that's a good point.
So yeah, I'm curious if that will come back,
Yeah.
at any point in the future. So,
Yeah.
but then as far as like the little kid with the blurry face, I thought it was a really good scene where Danny is checking on Flora at night and then turns around and you can see he's there kind of knelt down playing with the dollhouse in the background.
Mm-hmm.
And then, she encounters him in the storage room later as well. So I I like that they worked that in, and the moving face among those like dolls in the storage room. That I just thought that was cool.
Yeah. It was pretty creepy when she put the mask on the little boy.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Like, that's even worse, man. Just don't give him a face.
Yeah. But yeah, Flora talks about how she keeps getting tucked away in memories, and when she realizes she's in a memory, she wakes up.
Yeah.
And so that was similar to Mrs. Gross in the last episode, but there's also the extra twist that we find out Rebecca is taking control of her. And when Rebecca is in control of Flora, Flora is off in one of her own memories, and she doesn't remember what happened when Rebecca is in control. So I thought it was a good twist that, we've known or we've suspected for a while that Quint has been controlling Miles. Mm-hmm. And now we know Quint is dead. So it is like his ghost that's possessing Miles and making him act differently. But now we know that something similar is happening, and we have reason to believe that Rebecca is also dead and that she's doing the same thing to Flora. And so, So my theory is that means that Miles also doesn't remember when Quint is controlling him.
Right.
Which would explain some of his, erratic behavior and then seemingly, no remorse or regret or anything for it later. A lot of his behavior in the past, I think, would be explained by that. But the question that all that made me have is, does this mean Mrs. Gross is being haunted by someone? So when she spent that whole episode falling through her own memories, was that an indication that some other force was taking control of her?
Oh. Like that she's already gone.
Yeah. So she's been dead for some period of time at least. And so what we're seeing, all of those flashbacks that we saw of her in episode 5, were those all happening at some point when another entity was taking control of her for some reason.
I gotcha.
So
yeah, that'd be crazy.
So basically now I just think everybody's possessed all the time.
Yeah.
So who knows who's talking or doing anything?
What if we're not even watching a show right now?
What if we're not even recording a podcast right now?
Oh my God, I forgot to hit record.
What if I'm not even alive?
You're not. This is purgatory, man.
Yeah.
Purgatory is where you record a whole bunch of podcasts for little to no listeners.
We've been rocking purgatory since 2017, bro.
Yeah, that is a good theory, though, man. I didn't even think about that. Like, you think, oh, well, they can possess the people who are living,
mm-hmm.
But there's still that kind of confusion of why haven't they possessed Hannah? Or not Hannah. Why haven't they possessed Danny or Jamie or Owen?
Yeah.
Or whoever, yeah.
Well, we don't know that they haven't,
No, that's very true.
So that's what I mean is now I'm curious kind of retrospectively. Anytime anybody's done anything I thought was weird, it's just ghosts all the way down. So yeah. But anyway, and another thing I thought was weird on this one was that Jamie talks about how her mom cheated on her dad and ended up having somebody else's baby. And then that's basically the same thing that happened with Henry and Charlotte having Flora. And so those stories were eerily similar to me. So I'm wondering if there's some larger significance to something to do with that. And I don't know how that's going to fit in the larger story, but it seems to be too deliberate to be by accident.
Yeah. I'm glad that you were able to pay attention during that, because it was out of nowhere and I had to rewind it. I was just
Jamie's monologue?
Yes.
That went on for 15 minutes.
Yes. And I was just oh my God, what is going on here? And it was just come on. But
well, and we watched a movie recently. where I had commented that it was like every character, it was Ghost Ship, where I was like, every character is just standing around spouting the writer's like character bio of them. like there's just no context. Right. There's no reason. Yeah. It's so like forced of, this is my character's background. Here is how you should view me. Now your turn. Like, just not natural conversation at all. And I had that feeling during this one for sure. So, but yeah. Oh, but then, so in this one, there was also the scene where Henry's phone stops working and he's drunk and he's trying to call, and you find out, you know, he's the one, he's been calling Bly this whole time, hoping that Flora will answer. And he's drunk and he tries to call and she won't answer. So he decides to drive to Bly. So one of my predictions is he died when that happened. And it's been his ghost, and that's like his ghost can't leave the office for some reason. So we'll see if that comes up.
That's a good prediction too, man.
Yeah. But for this one, I really only had one prediction, and that was it. But I did have a question for you. Mm-hmm. My question... Oh, no, I'm sorry. We had the ending scene. So I said in the beginning this was kind of boring until the end. The ending is where Flora wakes up and is mad, calls out to Jessel, says she's crossed with her and is tired of getting pushed aside and tired of Miles getting pushed aside. And Jessel is about to explain when Danny opens the door and she can see Jessel for the first time.
Yeah.
So she tries to get away with the kids, but Jessel takes over Flora and runs up to the storage room. And then Miles hits her in the back of the head, presumably, you know, being possessed by Quint, and the screen goes black. And so my big question is, now that we know Jessel and Quint are possessing the kids on what seems to be a somewhat frequent basis, what are they trying to accomplish?
Yeah.
You know, like, because so far it seems random almost. Like Miles just acts like a dick for a few scenes and then Peter's gone. And I think going back through it, the way that Jessel talks, you can see scenes where Flora is kind of, now it seems more apparent that she's acting like Jessel. Mm-hmm. But I've yet to see anything as far as like motivation for what they're getting out of it. But yeah, I think that's one of the biggest questions moving forward.
Yeah.
Is I feel like there must be more to the story on that, but we have basically no clues that I've been able to pick up on about it. So
I do have to say, I feel like this episode really ended on a bang.
Yeah. Dad jokes.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it was a very intense ending, and the ending did a good job of getting my attention after I'd mostly tuned out. So
yeah, it's also like, hey, thank God you added that to this episode, because this episode was kind of boring.
It's a real snooze fest.
Yeah, it's like, I'm just glad I didn't, have my phone up, which I, generally I'm researching the movie while watching the movie.
Yeah.
For like our fun facts and stuff, but I can't do that here. So
yeah, right.
Ugh.
Yeah. Well, cool. Yeah. So that was episodes 5 and 6. We will be back in our next one talking about episodes 7 and 8, and then we'll do one for the finale and be done with it.
Yep.
Thanks for joining us.
Goodbye.
And that's it for today's episode. If you've listened this far, then thank you, and we hope you've enjoyed it. We're always looking for new ideas, so if you have any questions, comments, or movie suggestions, please send us an email at thehorrificpod@gmail.com, or feel free to comment on or message our Facebook page. Just search for The Horrific Podcast. Thanks for listening.